The American Dragon, Bryan Danielson, is done with AEW, as last night we saw the end of his full-time in-ring career after losing the AEW World Championship to Jon Moxley in disheartening, disappointing, and depressing fashion. I was there live. I'm going to tell you everything we know, why people are talking about the idea of Bryan potentially signing elsewhere, as it's now revealed that he is and has been for a while indeed a free agent, and what this moment was like, what it means for AEW moving forward with this story of Jon Moxley and this hostile takeover of All Elite Wrestling seeming to bleed into what will happen over the next couple of months. We're also going to talk about all of the other matches on the pay-per-view, what went down, what it means, and where we go from here. Before we get into that, though, I'm Omer Q for Real Take Wrestling. Be sure to leave a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you get notified whenever a new video is released. All right, first things first. This match had epic implications going into it. Bryan Danielson came in as the AEW World Champion, the best in the world. Many people have been waiting for this epic run, myself included. I've got the Bryan Danielson jacket on. I'm obviously a fan. And we got that big moment at AEW All In of Bryan on his terms, his way, with the right story behind it, winning a world championship at a stadium at arguably the biggest show of the year in Wembley. And as, jovial and as euphoric as that was, WrestleDream was that much more disappointing and depressing, as I said earlier, because we saw the end of not only Bryan's title reign as Jon Moxley defeated him, but we saw the end of his full-time in-ring career. Now, coming out of this, we are also learning, courtesy of FightfulSelect.com, Sean Ross Sapp and company, saying Bryan Danielson has legitimately been working for a number of weeks without a contract and is effectively a free agent. People close to him expect him to get neck surgery relatively soon, as opposed to signing or wrestling elsewhere. Now, Bryan has spoken about this at length in previous interviews, the fact that he likely will need neck surgery, that he feels like tingling in his arms, and, he's called out the fact that, he probably should not have been wrestling. Like, there were definitely instances where he felt like, it was kind of surprising to him that he was even wrestling, but there he was, and I'm honestly like a little bit choked up talking about it, right? Because, first things first, let's address the elephant in the room. Is Bryan going back to WWE? I don't expect that to happen. I will never say never in pro wrestling, because we've seen the impossible done time over time again. We've seen hell freeze over. CM Punk right now is the biggest draw in WWE outside of the Bloodline, but there's always a chance that he could go back. I just do not expect it to happen. I think, given Bryan's priorities and, what he has said he'd like to do with the rest of his time potentially wrestling, because, again, end of his full-time in-ring career, he said he would be back to, wrestle maybe a couple of times, maybe once, twice, 3 times a year in the future during big special moments. So while we won't get him week in, week out, it does seem like we will still be getting him at some point. But I just don't foresee that happening in WWE. Circumstances can change. Priorities can change. We all know that. But there's one thing we know is that Bryan Danielson and Tony Khan have a very close relationship. And, part of, I think, ending this the right way was, the appreciation that Tony Khan and Bryan Danielson had for each other. So for that reason, I don't really see Bryan going elsewhere. But he does return. It will be in AEW. But again, never say never. As far as the match itself, this was obviously a major moment for people in the Seattle area. Bryan was about maybe an hour and a half away. He was raised and born in Aberdeen, Washington, and he comes back to Tacoma to a hero's welcome. Everyone in the arena is on their feet. Literally, my entire section and like most of the hard cam side, we were all on our feet for like probably the first 10 minutes of this match, and everyone was cheering Bryan. I lost my voice last night cheering Bryan, and it was, I think people knew. Like, we all knew that this was likely going to be it, right? Tacoma, Washington. If you're going to end Bryan's career full time, this is the place to do it. And yet, I don't think this crowd was ready for what would happen. After a match where Bryan Danielson gets the ever-living crap beat out of him, he powers up once, twice, thrice. But in the end, Jon Moxley catches him in a sleeper hold. And in one of the most, I don't want to say underwhelming, but weird finishes that I still honestly don't know how I feel about. Moxley puts Bryan in the sleeper. Bryan doesn't tap. Bryan is not pinned. Bryan passes out. And Jon Moxley becomes the first ever 4-time All Elite Wrestling World Champion, thus ending the full-time in-ring career of the American Dragon. You know, like, here's the thing. There's this thing about AEW wrestling shows where if you go to the show, more often than not, you are going to leave satisfied. You are going to leave happy. And I've been to, you know, I've had the fortune of going to like probably like, what, 8 AEW shows this year, and I've gone to a bunch in previous years. And one thing that usually, you know, is the vibe of the moment, like right afterwards, and as you're like heading out into the parking lot and heading out into the train or wherever you're going, is there's this like, you know, big spirit of like hug, like camaraderie. There's this big spirit of like, oh my God, we just all saw a big show. People are chanting, people are celebrating, people are doing all this like cool, celebratory, positive stuff. That was not the case here. That was not the vibe of the people leaving the Tacoma Dome. You know, like when Bryan lost and what went down, and we'll talk about what went down after in just a second, but when what went down, it was almost this feeling of, you know, sadness that overcame the Tacoma Dome, that overcame the whatever 8,000 plus people in attendance. And it was a weird finish, or it was a weird feeling compared to a lot of the previous shows I've went to, and even wrestling shows I've went to. I don't think I've come out of a show where the crowd was as deflated as they were. And I understand it's on purpose. I'm not saying, oh my God, this is a shit show. It was bad. It was, you know, 1 star out of 5. No, the show was exactly what it was supposed to be. But it was just weird, you know. And I think it's like one of those things where, you know, when you have like one of the people, like a person who many people believe, myself included, to be one of the greatest to ever do it, and there's this feeling of like finality to it, and there's this feeling of like, wow, this was really it. We saw the end of Bryan Danielson's full-time in-ring career, and it's almost like it's too much to process in that one moment. And I think that's kind of what happened. And, you know, for me, and I will talk about the match and all the implications in just a second, but just to talk about Bryan. You know, the interesting thing about, like, Bryan Danielson and, like, what he means to me, right? And then I've gone on record saying this. I think he is the greatest to ever do it. I don't think there's anyone more talented in, like, as a total package than the American Dragon Bryan Danielson. The greatest technical wrestler of all time. One of the best baby faces of all time. The best underdog of all time. One of the most beloved, if not the most beloved wrestler of all time. There are not many things that this guy does not have a notch in his belt for. And for me personally, like, Bryan, and I was exposed to him for the first time, like, really in about 2009. And this is during a time where I just was not watching wrestling. Like, I was, my dad, my brother, and me, we would watch wrestling a lot growing up. Then, you know, 2007, things kind of changed. Obviously, WWE was going through a change. You had just had the Benoit double murder. And then you also had the changing to PG. The vibe of the show changed. The in-ring style was not as wrestling based. It was just a different style and a different vibe. And then that caused me to stop watching WWE. And at that point, WWE was all I really knew. I'd gotten a little bit into TNA at that point. And then, I just kind of fell out of wrestling. Then at that point, I go and I discover Ring of Honor. So I'm on YouTube. I'm like, okay, what's this thing? Ring of Honor. And I see Bryan Danielson there. And from the moment that, like, I saw, like, just one of his clips, I was hooked. And I was just like, Bryan's one of those guys, right? You see him for the first time in the ring. Like, even if you watch, like, a 10-second clip of him, bang, he's got it. Like, it was that automatic with Bryan Danielson. And, I think Meltzer told this story where, Nick Bockwinkel, another one of the greatest wrestlers of all time, he was at an indie show back in, like, 2000, and he saw Bryan Danielson, and this was, like, a big, like, King of the Indie tournament that was happening, and Bryan was just, like, a local guy who wasn't supposed to win it. He was just going to be, like, a filler guy in this tournament, and Bockwinkel saw him wrestle, had no exposure to him, and his immediate reaction was, this might be the greatest wrestler I've ever seen. And Bockwinkel thought so much of Bryan in that moment, that he goes like, hey man, goes to the promoter and says, this is the guy. Forget whoever you had winning this tournament, you should put him over. And that's what happened. And every single thing that happened after that, was almost a manifestation of that moment, because, like, at every point, no matter the situation he was in, no matter what he was originally booked to do, no matter what the perception of him was by the bookers or whatever, Bryan proved everyone wrong. And he did it through his talent, and he did it through his merit, and he did it while being, at the same time, in a business that very much has the ability to, like, eat you up, that in a business that is very cutthroat, and in a business where you have douchebags like Hulk Hogan, who only really care about themselves and where they fit into the picture. Like, Bryan Danielson did his entire career while also being one of the most selfless humans in pro wrestling. There are not many people, actually, you will not find a single person, I don't think, that has a bad thing to say about Bryan Danielson. You will not find someone who didn't say that when I met Bryan, he was great. Bryan went out of his way to help younger guys. Bryan went out of his way not to start, like, arguments or get into pettiness. Bryan went out of his way to not win the title. A title like the AEW World Championship was almost became a meme that everyone wanted Bryan to win. Tony wanted Bryan to win. All the fans wanted Bryan to win. Everyone wanted Bryan to win that AEW World Championship, but Bryan wouldn't do it because his goal was not, you gotta get on the top of the card, brother. His goal was to just wrestle. And it's like again, I don't want to get too heady here, but it's like almost like such a poetic and beautiful thing, because by focusing on the art of pro wrestling, Bryan legitimately became one of the greatest of all time. And I go back to his original retirement in 2016, like genuinely like one of the saddest I've ever been as a wrestling fan. I'm looking back at that. I'm so glad that he got this second run. I'm so glad that he got to finish his story, for lack of a better term, in AEW. And, look, I was a big fan of Shawn Michaels, but I didn't watch Shawn Michaels in the 90s. I was a big fan of The Undertaker, but I didn't watch The Undertaker in the 90s. I wasn't alive. And, you hear a lot of guys talk about, when those guys retired, it hit people in a different way because they had been following their entire career. I have had the pleasure to follow most of Bryan's career. And seeing that come to a finality, at least full-time, right? But really come to a finality in the way that it did, in the manner that it did, it's a lot. It's a lot to process, and especially like this is like literally like one of the few guys I've ever I'll let you guys in on this. I have met a lot of people, like, it's a pleasure to meet, like, politicians, like actors, like, or, a wrestler or two, and I am usually never starstruck. I really don't feel that. At the end of the day, I believe people are just people. One of the only times that's ever happened to me is when I was at the WrestleDream media scrum and I saw Bryan Danielson. And I tried to be very professional in that moment. I tried my best to be very posh and all that kind of stuff. The second I saw Bryan come out, I was like, I had to do everything in my power to hold in like the grin. I was like, oh my God, it's the greatest wrestler of all time, and he's right there. And I regret I couldn't work up a question to ask him because I was just like in the moment, like, oh my God, it's Bryan freaking Danielson. But yeah, man, I know. I don't even know. But he was special. He was truly special. And again, it's like part sadness because it's like selfishly, like I want to see Bryan like wrestle week in, week out, and it's sad to know that is done. But I'm also glad that he got to end it on his terms in a way that befits him, because even if you like listen to Excalibur on commentary, like there was emotion coming from him last night, and man, what a fucking career. Greatest of all time in my view. Anyway, let's talk about what happened though. Obviously the match happens, Moxley chokes Bryan out, and afterwards they put the AEW World Championship into a bag. That was an interesting note. You had the Blackpool Combat Club come out. They put the AEW title into a bag. Wheeler Yuta comes out, try to make the save, but then ends up turning on Bryan, putting the plastic bag over him begrudgingly, and Bryan Danielson stretchered out. Medical attention was sought. You had all the baby faces come out, including Private Party, including Darby Allin, including Adam Cole, Bebe, to try to make the save, but it was too late. Bryan was already too far gone, and he had too far injured. He was literally choked out. And it seems like what they are going for here is some sort of, again, potential rebrand of the title is what I'm thinking, because they put that title in that bag as if to say, like, okay, we don't want to show off this title. And that's like what I think like is leading me to believe, like, this could be working into an invasion thing, because you had the lines kind of drawn. You had the entire AEW locker room come out, Darby, Orange Cassidy, etc., etc. So I think, in my view, I see that as like lines being drawn in a potential invasion. And again, maybe that's me getting work, but that's kind of the way it came off to me. Bryan was, of course, stretchered out, and then you had the baby faces kind of, again, very depressing, like ending, like just walk off defeated, because by the time they came out, it was too late. Crazy though. I think this is definitely one of those watch what happens at Dynamite weeks, because there's some explaining to do. I hope that we get another advancement in the Moxley story here, because I think the payoff, right, was like, okay, Mox wins the title, and now it's like, all right, why? I understand that we need to like maybe flesh it out a little bit more, but like we need to also advance. That's the one thing I will say. If we don't see some advancement over the next week or two, then I'm like, we got to start telling the story a little bit more. But we'll see. Obviously, Bryan Danielson, I could talk about him for like hours if I wanted to, but he was not the only thing that was on this show. There, of course, was multiple matches on this show. I was live in the arena at the Tacoma Dome. By the way, guys, be sure to smash that thumbs up, subscribe, hit that notification bell. Use the promo code REALTAKE to get $20 off your first purchase from SeatGeek. Link in the description below. WrestleDream was a wild night of wrestling. Some really, really good matches, some really matches, but overall fantastic night of in-ring action. AEW delivering a banger pay-per-view as they normally do. When we started off with a banger, it was Switchblade Jay White versus Hangman Adam Page. Hangman Page came out to a thunderous booing ovation in Tacoma, Washington. Everyone was chanting, "Whose house? Swerve's house." Hangman was pissed off beyond belief, which I think really was part of the story here, was Hangman kind of being distracted, and that allowed Jay White to, who was focused at this point. Jay White, remember, is returning from injury. He's returning from being off of TV for nearly, what is it now, like 5 months? So he is trying now to reestablish himself, and he's playing the babyface. Hangman Page is the heel. This is a very weird dynamic that we had not seen up until this point, but beautiful ending to this match. Hangman Page goes for the buckshot lariat, reversed into the reversed into Switchblade, Jay White's finisher, and that was crazy. That was crazy. Why am I forgetting his finisher's name? I don't know. I am still tired from last night, guys. It was a long night of professional wrestling action. But Jay White finishing off Hangman Adam Page, the Blade Runner. Boom. There we go. He finished off Hangman Adam Page with the Blade Runner. 1, 2, 3 in the middle of the ring. I know many people were going to say, like, oh my God, why did Hangman Page lose? Why would they do this? Why would they do this? Well, the reality is that, number one, Jay White needs to win from a booking standpoint, if we're being honest. But number two, I think the story that they're telling here is like, Hangman Page is probably the most talented guy in the locker room. And when he's focused, when he's locked in, when he doesn't have the outside distractions, there's nobody that can beat him. But the only person that can beat him is himself. Because when he allows himself to be distracted by things like the crowd, when he allows himself to be, caught up and focus on the wrong things, that is when Hangman has his biggest downfalls. Think back to like Swerve, that whole series. The whole thing was Hangman Page being distracted by his unmitigated rage of Swerve Strickland, being distracted and unfocused on the talent that was Swerve Strickland. And until he finally channeled all that focus, that energy into focus at All Out, he wasn't able to beat him. And I think we saw a bit of Hangman Page taking a step back here in the storyline of, him being distracted by this crowd, distracted by being in Tacoma, Washington, obviously the home of Swerve Strickland. And I don't know. I think it was a good wrinkle to tell. And Switchblade, can't wait to see him hopefully win championship gold pretty soon. Speaking of championship gold, we also had the AEW Women's World Championship on the line. Mariah May defending against Willow Nightingale. This match was a banger. Again, back-to-back matches. It was at this point where I know it's so I bought this jacket, right? And I was already really hot in the arena. I don't know if they got AC in the Tacoma Dome. It's an old arena, but I was sweating bullets because I was like, oh my God, these matches are killing it. And I'm cheering, I'm doing my thing. These two burned the house down. Willow Nightingale over as all hell. And I love her kind of advancement here because, Willow, just a year and a half, 2 years ago, was someone you kind of knew, okay, she's got a lot of potential here. Can she fulfill it? And in her first singles match for the AEW Women's World Championship, she proved exactly why that potential was seen by many people. She proved exactly why she belongs in this spot. And she produced, along with Mariah May, in my view, again, on a card that had some insane matches. I would say this is probably my second or third best match on this card. And again, people are it's only the second best match. On this card, that is an insane thing to have. It's legitimately a really good match, and probably, in my opinion, Mariah May's best match overall for the Women's World Championship, including that banger she had against Toni Storm at All In. And Mariah May, though, picks up the victory. She was able to subdue Willow for long enough, pin her down 3. I thought it was interesting because now it's Mariah May, and then this was mentioned at the press conference. By the way, how y'all not going to ask Mariah May a single damn question at the press conference? That was crazy because nobody raised their hand to ask a question, and she just goes, "Come on, guys, do you not like women's wrestling?" And then one person asked a pity question. It was, come on, man. It's Mariah May. You have the Women's World Champion in front of you. Ask a question. Anyway. But it's going to be interesting to see where this goes from here. Obviously, Britt Baker, I think, was factored into plans. Those plans changed after Britt Baker suffered strep throat, and then the hurricane happened. So she's ran through like a lot of the roster now. We'll see what happens with her. Next match, we had the TNT Championship on the line. Katsuyori Shibata, the wrestler, one of the greatest wrestlers of all time, in my view. Katsuyori Shibata versus Jack Perry for the TNT title. Shibata was over. This match killed it. Jack Perry hitting knee after knee after knee. Shibata taking kick after kick after kick. No selling it. Awesome chain wrestling here. Finish was kind of weird and wonky. So Shibata has a sleeper hold on Jack Perry. And Perry was able to roll back, as you can see here, pin his shoulders down, Shibata's that is, and the ref counted 1, 2, 3. Very weird post-match, because right after that, we get like no music playing, a late bell ring, and Jack Perry was announced to have retained the TNT Championship. So again, it came off a little bit weird, but maybe that's what they were going for. I couldn't tell if there was a botch. I haven't watched the show back on live TV in full yet, so we'll need to do that before I make that judgment. But that was interesting. Afterwards, Shibata is getting beat down by Jack Perry until we get Daniel Garcia appearing. And Daniel Garcia makes the save out of nowhere. Happy Gilmore himself, MJF, comes out. He's been taking time off to film a movie in Hollywood, Happy Gilmore 2 with Adam Sandler. And he comes out, and he's got unfinished business, obviously, with Daniel Garcia. He cuts a promo on him, reintroduces the Dynamite Diamond Ring, and says, you shouldn't have told me that you found it or you pawned it off at a shop in Buffalo, because I went back and I found it. And right as he's going to hit Daniel Garcia with the Dynamite Diamond Ring, it's all about that boom. Adam Cole, baby, makes his long awaited return. 13 months out of action. And Adam Cole, baby, made his return, looking in great shape, looking ready to go, walking like he was feeling like $1 million. He had those Jordans on, so I understand he couldn't like go full speed on them. You can't crease the Jordans. Like, shout out to Adam Cole. But look, there's gonna be a lot of people who tell you that, oh man, this is booty, this is cheeks, this sucks because it didn't work out last year. They are obviously working towards an Adam Cole MJF thing here. Adam Cole obviously ran off MJF at the pay-per-view. And they are working towards this feud again. And the way they're doing it is interesting because I think they're going to retcon the devil stuff. I legitimately think that. I think they're going to retcon the devil stuff. And I think the dynamic of Adam Cole coming in as a babyface and MJF going into this feud as a heel, which is probably the way it should have been done last year, that's interesting to me. And I am going to reserve my full judgment on this, much like I did with Cody Rhodes and his AEW or his WWE Championship reign. I'm going to give it a few months. We'll see if they can cook. If by full gear it's booty, I'll let you know. But I'm really excited. And above that, guys, if I'm being totally honest, this was this was almost designed like a Heyman style segment. I saw someone online say it, and it kind of resonated with me. It was kind of like, star after star after star, moment after moment comes out, because you had Daniel Garcia, you had MJF come in, and then you had Adam Cole make the save at the end. So you had Daniel Garcia re-cementing himself as a babyface, coming out, getting a big pop, MJF making his return, and then Adam Cole making the save, making his long-awaited return. And it was kind of reestablishing the order of things in AEW. It's like, all right, bang, 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 we got our top stars. Let's go. Still one guy left. We know who it is. We'll wait and see. But that was cool. Up next, we had the three-way match for the AEW International Championship. Ricochet, Ospreay, Takeshita for the international title. This was one of the best matches of the year. This was one of the best matches of the year, period, point blank, exclamation mark, all of the above. They freaking killed it. Like, this was insane. I don't even know how to explain what I saw, but yeah, no, it was freaking insane. Go watch the match. That's all I will say. This is legitimately one of the best wrestling matches you will ever see. One of the best three-way matches I've ever seen in my life. And the right guy won. Because after John Callis comes out to make the save, after Will Ospreay had Takeshita laid out, Don Callis comes out, he moves the ref out, and he goes to hit Ospreay with a screwdriver. But then Ospreay grabs Don Callis, goes to hit him with the Tiger Driver 91, and then a hooded figure comes out of nowhere, takes the screwdriver, hits Will Ospreay in the head, and it's revealed that the hooded figure was indeed Kyle Fletcher, who at this point had been very hesitant to turn on Will Ospreay, had been very hesitant to involve himself with the Don Callis family's shenanigans about Will Ospreay. But now he has made his choice, and he waits for Takeshita to hit the knee. 1, 2, 3, and new international champion, finally, Konosuke Takeshita. Takeshita has been crowned. We all knew that this was going to happen. This is the culmination of over a year of work. Last year in August, he had beaten Kenny Omega twice in the same week. We were wondering, when are we going to get that title reign? When are we going to get like the next step, the next evolution in Takeshita? We got it here, and I can't wait to see what he does next, especially with Don Callis as a mouthpiece. If you watch that press conference, Callis was going crazy. He was crashing out. That was crazy. And then after the match, we saw Kyle Fletcher hit the Tiger Driver 91 on Will Ospreay. I thought this was a great way to get the title off of Ospreay. And no matter what you want to say, oh my God, Ospreay lost. Ospreay's one of those guys where he can lose and he's still over. He is their guy. But making Takeshita into a star, that's smart. Because we know this guy's got money in him. He's got big appeal. Dude, like when he comes out with those like big like baggy pants, I'm just like, man, he screams anime villain to me. He's got that look in his eye, the aura that Takeshita has is crazy, man. Shout out to him. All right, then we had obviously then we had a couple of more matches that I'll just quickly go through. I didn't really watch because I was out in concessions or meeting people. Shout out to Taco Kid, who we met, by the way. Shout out to you, Taco Kid. Darby Allin beat Brody King via pinfall. Hologram and Beast Mortos, which I actually was able to get most of. That was a good match. It went from no heat to like the crowd really getting behind it. I thought this was a great pay-per-view exhibition for Hologram and the Beast Mortos. They both got over. Then we also had Mark Briscoe defeating Chris Jericho. Thank God there's no Nueve. And finally, before we talk about the tag team title match, because I forgot to add this in, there was also a segment with the hometown hero, Swerve Strickland. So Swerve comes out, Nana comes out, and he's saying that Swerve is going to get an update on his status. Swerve then comes out, heroes welcome, massive pop, people are loving him. And Swerve says that, he still feels some tingling in his neck. Maybe it's karma for all the stuff that he was saying about Bryan Danielson, which is very similar stuff, tingling in his neck and all that. But then Swerve does a very interesting thing. Swerve, then says, I might be feeling down, I might be feeling bad, but I'm still ready to go. And he announces that he is indeed cleared to wrestle, after which MVP comes out with Shelton Benjamin in hand. I think people at this point thought we were going to get Bobby Lashley. And he asks, Swerve, have you thought about my offer? And Swerve says, Nana, I ain't gonna lie, man. MVP made some good points because I lost my title on your watch. I lost to Hangman on your watch. I did all this stuff. All my biggest failures happened on your watch. But at the same time, I wouldn't have had any of that without you. And then he says, I don't turn my back on family, and gives Shelton Benjamin the biggest, like, nose to nose, like, stare like I've ever seen. Like, he's angry. He's like, nah, step away, bro. You don't want this. And crowd breaks, or like, then the crowd comes in, they break it up, and we don't get Bobby Lashley, but I think they're obviously going to get to Shelton versus Swerve first. Bobby Lashley will come in, but it was interesting the way they did it. But I thought it was a good segment. Have Swerve come out in his hometown crowd, get everyone hyped, get everyone amped, and, do a nice little showcase for him. Finally, got to talk about the AEW World Tag Team Championships. Private Party came out as over as they've ever been. This insane promo package featuring Amazing Red, giving them this hype talk that got me hyped. I was like, oh, ready to go, run through a brick wall. Shout out to Amazing Red. And then the Young Bucks get out there and near fall. We all think it's over after they hit the Meltzer driver, but Isaiah Cassidy kicks out. And then Isaiah Cassidy and Mark Quinn seem to have them. And then Matt Jackson kicks out. The vibe of this was very similar to a match that I was in person for in 2022. That was All Out. The Acclaimed versus Swerve in Our Glory. A lot of people said that match should have been audibled, and that the Acclaimed should have won. While I don't necessarily, think that on a logistic scale that could have worked, I do think, forget hindsight, foresight would have told you that Private Party should have won this match. They didn't. Young Bucks did their thing. EVP triggers, Meltzer driver, 1, 2, 3. And still AEW World Tag Team Champions, the Young Bucks. The Private Party beat the Young Bucks 5 years ago. I understand that things happen. People get lost, people get injured, whatever. You had a chance after 5 years to finally make good at a time where they are as hot as they've ever been. In a moment that could have been an insane, not only an insane pop, but an insane piece of storytelling, that they finally redeemed themselves after 5 years. And you could have gone one up over that and said, the Young Bucks, their kryptonite, believe it or not, is Private Party. The storytelling elements were all there, and AEW did not execute. I was very disappointed in this. From a booking standpoint, as a commentator, also as a fan. Because not only does this happen at a time where, Private Party's hot, but the Young Bucks title reign is booty cheeks. Nobody likes it. I gotta stop saying booty cheeks, but the Young Bucks title reign is not good. This is not good. It has not been good for a while now. I don't even understand what the premise is for them being tag champions, other than the fact that they're the EVPs and they're holding the belts. They've fallen off. Not as talents, but as characters for sure. And they need to fix it. They could have gone a way to making them interesting here, but they did not. Unfortunate. Regardless, though, WrestleDream was an amazing night of pro wrestling action. Fantastic to be there live, and it could not be possible without you guys. Thank you so much for your support. If you guys want to continue supporting, y'all know what to do. Leave a thumbs up. Let me know what you guys thought in the comment section of AEW WrestleDream. Did the right people win? What did you think about Bryan? What's your favorite Bryan Danielson memory? Whatever you want to say, let me know in the comment section. Your thoughts, your opinions, your questions. I want to hear from y'all. And until next time, be happy, be healthy, and as always, keep it real. I'll see you next time, guys.